My son poured soup on my head because I asked for a second helping of food. I wiped my face and left. At the next morning, his bank account was empty, and I had already. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I had always believed that family was everything. For 68 years, I'd lived by that principle, raised my son Michael with love and sacrifice, worked 2 jobs to put him through college, and when my husband passed away 5 years ago, I'd made sure to stay close to Michael and his wife, Jennifer. I wanted to be the grandmother who baked cookies, who showed up for every soccer game, who was there when they needed me. My small house in suburban Ohio had become quieter after Robert died, but I'd found peace in my routines. I volunteered at the library on Tuesdays, had my book club on Thursdays, and every Sunday, I'd drive over to Michael's place for family dinner. That's what families did, wasn't it? They stayed connected. The first sign that something was wrong came 6 months ago, though I didn't recognize it then. Michael had asked me to add him to my bank account, just as an authorized user, he'd said, in case of emergencies. Mom, what if something happens to you? What if you fall and we need to access your funds for medical care? His concern seemed genuine, his eyes soft with worry. Jennifer had nodded along, her hand on his shoulder, both of them looking at me with such apparent care. I'd signed the papers without hesitation. He was my son. Why wouldn't I trust him? The second sign came 2 months later. I'd noticed some unexpected withdrawals, nothing massive, just 200 here, 300 there. When I'd asked Michael about it during one of our Sunday dinners, he'd laughed it off. Mom, those are the groceries I picked up for you, remember? And I paid your electric bill last month when you forgot. Had I forgotten? My memory wasn't what it used to be. Maybe he was right. Jennifer had placed her hand on mine then, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. We're just taking care of you, Mom. That's what family does. But the withdrawals continued. $500, $800, $1,000. Each time I brought it up, Michael had an explanation. Each time I swallowed my doubts because he was my son, and sons didn't steal from their mothers. Did they? The dinner party was supposed to be a celebration. Michael had gotten a promotion, or so he'd said. They'd invited me over on a Saturday evening, which was unusual. Sunday was our day. But I'd been excited, had even baked my famous apple pie and brought a bottle of wine. The table was set beautifully, Jennifer's doing no doubt. She'd always been particular about appearances. Michael's 2 children, Emma and Jake, were eating quietly in the living room, watching television. Something about the atmosphere felt off, though I couldn't place what it was. The smiles seemed forced, the conversation stilted. I'd made the mistake of enjoying the meal. The soup was delicious, some kind of creamy tomato basil. And when I'd finished my bowl, I'd done what I'd always done in my own home, what my mother had done, what felt natural and comfortable. Michael, honey, could I have a little more soup? It's really wonderful, I'd said, holding out my bowl with a smile. The room went silent. Jennifer's fork stopped midway to her mouth. Michael's face transformed into something I didn't recognize, his features twisted, his eyes cold and hard. Could you have more soup? He repeated, his voice low and dangerous. Could you have more? Before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, he'd grabbed the serving tureen from the center of the table. Time seemed to slow down as I watched him stand, watched him lift it, watched the recognition dawn too late. The hot soup cascaded over my head, burning my scalp, streaming down my face and neck, soaking into my favorite cardigan, the blue one Robert had given me for our last anniversary together. I gasped, my hands flying to my face as the liquid seared my skin. That's what you get for always asking for more, Michael shouted. More, more, more. You're never satisfied. Do you know how much you've cost us?" Emma started crying from the living room. Jennifer sat frozen, her face carefully neutral. And I sat there, soup dripping from my hair, my dignity stripped away in front of my grandchildren, in front of the son I'd given everything to. I didn't say a word. I took the napkin from my lap, wiped my face as best as I could, and stood up. My hands were shaking, but I held my head high. I walked to the door, grabbed my purse, and left. I didn't look back. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember turning onto my street or parking in my driveway. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, the dried soup crusting in my hair, the smell of tomatoes and humiliation thick in my nostrils. My scalp still burned. My heart burned worse. Inside my house, I stood under the shower until the water ran cold, scrubbing away the soup but unable to wash away the image of my son's face contorted with rage. The bathroom mirror showed me a woman I barely recognized, red splotches on her forehead and cheeks where the hot liquid had made contact, eyes hollow with shock. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold, and I thought. Really thought. Perhaps for the first time in months. What had Michael said? Do you know how much you've cost us? Cost them? I'd been giving to him his entire life. Even after he'd gotten married, gotten a good job, bought a house 3 times the size of mine. When dawn broke, I made a decision. I needed to know exactly what had been taken from me. Monday morning, I was at the bank when the doors opened. The young woman behind the counter, Sarah, her name tag read, smiled politely as I requested printed statements for the past 6 months. As I waited, I watched the other customers, people going about their normal banking, unaware that my entire world had shifted on its axis. The statements, when they came, were thick. I took them to a quiet corner of the bank lobby and began to read. My hands started trembling by the 2nd page. By the 5th page, I felt sick. $52,000. In 6 months, $52,000 had been withdrawn from my account. The savings I'd built over 40 years of work, the nest egg Robert and I had carefully cultivated, the money I'd planned to use for my final years, maybe leave something for my grandchildren, more than half of it was gone. The withdrawals had started small, as I'd noticed, but they'd accelerated. In the past month alone, Michael had taken $18,000. $18,000. What was he spending it on? The promotion he'd mentioned, had that even been real, or was it just another lie to explain away his theft? I sat in that bank lobby for an hour, reading through every transaction, my shock gradually crystallizing into something else. Something colder. Something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Anger. But not the hot, explosive kind. This was different. This was ice in my veins, calculation in my mind. This was the anger of a woman who'd been too trusting, too loving, too willing to believe the best in people, even when those people were destroying her. I thought about calling the police right then. Theft was theft, even if the thief was your son. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the last vestige of the mother I'd been, the woman who couldn't quite believe her son was truly beyond redemption. Or maybe it was something more practical, a sense that I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with before I made my move. Instead, I went home and opened my laptop. Robert had taught me the basics of computers before he died, enough to check email and look things up online. Now, I educated myself. I researched financial elder abuse. That's what this was called, apparently. I wasn't alone. Thousands of elderly parents were victimized by their own children every year. I learned about joint accounts and authorized users, about the legal distinction between the two. I learned about my rights, about burden of proof, about the steps I could take. I made notes, careful and precise, in a notebook I kept hidden in my bedroom closet. and I formulated a plan. First, I would document everything. Every withdrawal, every lie Michael had told me to explain them away. I would go through my emails, my text messages, anything that might serve as evidence. Second, I would remove Michael's access to my account, but carefully, strategically. I couldn't let him know I was onto him, not yet. I needed to be smart about this. Third, and this was where my plan was still forming, I would find a way to get my money back. And I would make sure Michael faced consequences for what he'd done. Not revenge, justice. I spent the rest of Monday making phone calls. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer for Wednesday. I called my bank and asked about the process for removing an authorized user. I contacted the Adult Protective Services office and asked what resources might be available to me. By Monday evening, I had the bones of a strategy. I would need help. I couldn't do this alone. But I had allies I hadn't considered yet. My book club friends, my neighbors, the lawyer I'd found who specialized in elder law. Tuesday morning, I woke up early. My face was still slightly red from the soup burns, but the physical pain had subsided. The emotional wounds ran deeper, but I wouldn't let them weaken me. I had work to do. Wednesday afternoon, I sat in the office of Margaret Chen, Esquire, a woman in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper reputation for handling elder abuse cases. Her office was small but professional, lined with law books and certificates. She'd listened to my story without interruption, taking notes with quick, efficient movements. "Mrs. Patterson," she said when I'd finished, "what your son has done is called financial exploitation of an elderly person. In Ohio, it's a felony. With $52,000 involved, we're talking about a second-degree felony, 2 to 8 years in prison if convicted." The words hung in the air. Prison. My son. I felt my throat tighten, but I forced myself to stay composed. "I need to be very clear with you," Margaret continued, leaning forward. "If we pursue this legally, there's no going back. This will destroy your relationship with your son, possibly permanently. It will impact your grandchildren. It will become public record. Are you prepared for that?" Was I? I thought of Emma's tears, of Jake's confused face. I thought of Sunday dinners that would never happen again, of birthdays and holidays fractured beyond repair. Then I thought of the soup dripping down my face, of Michael's cold eyes, of $52,000 stolen from the woman who'd given him life. "I'm prepared," I said. "What do we do first?" Margaret smiled, not warmly, but with approval. "First, we document everything. Then we remove his access to your accounts. But we do it through the bank directly, with their records showing the date and time. We'll also file a report with Adult Protective Services, and we're going to need to gather evidence of the abuse, not just financial, but the emotional abuse, the incident with the soup. Do you have any witnesses?" "My grandchildren saw it," I said quietly, "and Jennifer, his wife." "They won't testify against him," Margaret said bluntly. "Not willingly. But we might not need them. Let me ask you this. Do you think Michael knows you're taking action?" "I haven't contacted him since Saturday night," I said. "But..." I trailed off, realizing something. Michael would have noticed by now that I hadn't called to apologize, hadn't sent my usual Sunday morning text asking what time dinner would be. My absence would be conspicuous. "Go to the bank tomorrow," Margaret instructed. "Remove his access. Get copies of everything. And, Mrs. Patterson, don't confront him about this. Not yet. Let him wonder. Let him worry. People make mistakes when they're nervous." I left Margaret's office with a folder full of documents to sign and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. The afternoon sun was bright, almost aggressive, as I walked to my car. I didn't notice the vehicle parked across the street, didn't see Jennifer behind the wheel, watching me leave the law office. Thursday morning, I was back at the bank. This time, I met with the manager, a middle-aged man named Frank Collins, who'd handled Robert's estate after he passed. I explained the situation, calmly, factually, showing him the statements Margaret had helped me prepare. Frank's face grew increasingly somber as he reviewed the documents. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm so sorry this happened. We'll remove his access immediately. I'm also going to flag your account for suspicious activity and add extra security measures. No withdrawals over $100 without in-person verification. Does that work for you?" "That works perfectly," I said. The process took an hour. Forms to sign, verifications to make, security questions to set up. When it was done, Frank handed me a printed confirmation. His access was removed as of 10:43 a.m. If he tries to access the account, he'll be denied and will be notified immediately. "Thank you, Frank," I said, and I meant it. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to my book club friend Patricia's house. Patricia had been my closest friend for 15 years, a retired social worker who'd seen more family dysfunction than anyone should have to witness. Over tea in her sunny kitchen, I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You know what this means, don't you?" Patricia finally said. "When Michael tries to access that account and can't, and he will try, Helen, probably soon, he's going to know you've cut him off. He's going to come after you." "I know," I said. "I'm ready." But I wasn't ready for how quickly it would happen. That evening, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. My heart hammered, but I didn't answer. He called 3 more times. Then Jennifer called. Then Michael again. Finally, a text message appeared. "Mom, we need to talk. There's been some kind of mistake with your bank account. Call me immediately." A mistake. He was already trying to gaslight me, to make me doubt what I knew to be true. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the text to Margaret Chen with a simple message. "It's begun." Friday morning, I received an email notification from my bank. Someone had attempted to make a withdrawal from my account at 9:15 a.m. The transaction had been denied due to insufficient authorization. Michael had tried to take more money. Even after everything, even after burning me with soup and stealing $52,000, he'd tried to take more. I printed the email and added it to my growing folder of evidence. Margaret had been right. People made mistakes when they were nervous, and Michael was clearly very nervous now. Monday morning, exactly 1 week after the soup incident, I walked into the Adult Protective Services office with Margaret Chen at my side. The building was institutional and depressing, with fluorescent lights that buzzed and chairs that had seen better decades. But the woman who met with us, Sandra Morrison, had kind eyes and a notepad that was already half filled with notes from our phone conversation. "Mrs. Patterson," Sandra said, "I've reviewed the preliminary information you provided. I want you to know that we take these cases very seriously. I'll need to ask you some difficult questions today. Are you comfortable proceeding?" I was. For 2 hours, I answered questions about my relationship with Michael, about the financial abuse, about the incident with the soup. Sandra took notes, asked for clarification, requested copies of my documentation. Margaret sat beside me, occasionally interjecting with legal clarifications, her presence a steady anchor. "Based on what you've told me," Sandra said when we were finished, "I'm going to open a formal investigation. I'll need to interview your son and his wife. I should warn you, this will likely escalate the situation. Once they know there's an official investigation, they may try to contact you to convince you to drop it. It's important that you document any attempts at intimidation or coercion." "I understand," I said, though my hands were shaking slightly as I signed the final forms. We were walking to the parking lot when Margaret's phone rang. She answered, listened for a moment, then her expression darkened. "Helen, that was my office. Your son is there. He's demanding to speak with you." My stomach dropped. "How did he know?" He probably doesn't know about the APS report yet, but he knows about me. Someone must have seen you at my office last week. This is what I was worried about. He's trying to confront you before you can take further action. What should I do? Margaret's eyes were steel. We go back to my office. We face him together. But Helen, you don't have to explain yourself to him. You don't have to justify your actions. Remember, he's the one who committed a crime, not you. Michael was pacing in Margaret's waiting room when we arrived, his face red, his movements agitated. Jennifer sat in one of the chairs, her expression carefully blank. When Michael saw me, he rushed forward. Mom, thank God. This is all a huge misunderstanding. Can we talk? Alone? No, Margaret said firmly, stepping between us. Any conversation happens in my office with me present, or it doesn't happen at all. Michael's jaw clenched, but he nodded. We moved into Margaret's office, me behind her desk, Margaret standing beside me like a sentinel, Michael and Jennifer facing us like defendants at trial. Mom, please, Michael started, his voice taking on a pleading tone I recognized from his childhood when he'd been caught doing something wrong. I don't understand why you're doing this, why you've cut off my access to your account, why you're meeting with lawyers. If you needed something, all you had to do was ask. The audacity of it took my breath away. If I needed something, I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. Michael, you stole $52,000 from me. I didn't steal anything. His voice rose, the veneer of concern cracking. That money was for family expenses, for emergencies. You said I could use it. I said you could have access in case of a medical emergency, I corrected. Not to drain my life savings, not to take $18,000 in a single month. What was that for, Michael? What emergency required $18,000? Jennifer spoke for the first time, her voice cold. Mom, you're being unreasonable. We've been supporting you. The groceries, the bills, which I was paying for myself before you convinced me to give Michael access to my account, I interrupted. I have the statements. I have proof of every withdrawal. And I have witnesses to what Michael did to me at dinner. Michael's face transformed then, the mask dropping completely. You ungrateful. We've been taking care of you. Do you know how much of a burden you've been? How much time Jennifer spends checking on you? How much I worry? Michael. Margaret's voice cut through his tirade like a knife. I'm going to stop you right there. Mrs. Patterson has filed an official report with Adult Protective Services. There's an active investigation into financial exploitation. Anything you say right now can and will be used in those proceedings. I strongly suggest you stop talking and consult with your own attorney. The color drained from Michael's face. She what? You heard me. Now I'm going to ask you and your wife to leave. If you attempt to contact Mrs. Patterson directly, to coerce her, threaten her, or intimidate her in any way, you'll be adding harassment charges to the financial exploitation charges. Do I make myself clear? Michael looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something like panic in his eyes. Then it hardened into pure rage. This isn't over, Mom. You're making a huge mistake. You're going to regret this. The only mistake I made, I said quietly, was trusting you. Now leave. Jennifer grabbed Michael's arm and pulled him toward the door. He resisted for a moment, then let her lead him out. The door closed behind them with a soft click that somehow sounded final. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My entire body was trembling. You did well, Margaret said. That was incredibly difficult, and you handled it perfectly. Go home, Helen. Rest. Take a few days to recover. You've earned it. I took her advice. For 3 days, I stayed home, doors locked, phone on silent except for Margaret's number and Patricia's. I read books. I gardened. I tried to quiet the anxiety that whispered in the back of my mind that I'd destroyed my family, that I'd overreacted, that maybe Michael had been right. But then I'd remember the soup, the burns, the cold contempt in his eyes. And I'd remember the bank statements, the theft, the lies. No, I hadn't overreacted. I'd finally reacted appropriately. By Thursday, I felt stronger, ready for whatever came next. The letter arrived on Friday morning, slipped under my door sometime during the night. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive-looking, with my name written in Jennifer's perfect cursive. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it, my coffee growing cold on the kitchen counter. Dear Mom, I'm writing to you because Michael is too hurt to reach out himself. He's been crying for days, devastated by what's happened between you two. He can't understand why you're doing this to our family. I know Michael made some mistakes. He should have communicated better about the money he was withdrawing. But Mom, everything he took was for legitimate purposes. Renovations to the house so you'd have a nice place to stay when you visit. Emma's tutoring because she was struggling in math. Medical bills from Jake's asthma treatments. We didn't want to burden you with the details. We're willing to pay back everything, every penny, if you'll just drop this investigation. We can set up a payment plan. We'll sign whatever documents you want. But please don't destroy Michael's career, his reputation, his children's future over a misunderstanding. Think about Emma and Jake. They're asking why Grandma won't come to Sunday dinner anymore. They don't understand why their father is so upset. Is this really what you want? To tear apart our family? We love you, Mom. We miss you. Please call me so we can fix this. Jennifer. I read the letter 3 times, analyzing each sentence, each carefully chosen word. The manipulation was masterful, I had to admit. The appeal to my love for my grandchildren, the reframing of theft as mistakes and miscommunication, the promise of repayment, coupled with the threat of what continuing would do to Michael's career. A month ago, this letter would have worked. I would have called Jennifer, apologized, agreed to drop everything. I would have accepted whatever payment plan they offered and convinced myself that family harmony was more important than justice. But that was before I'd spent 3 days reviewing bank statements, before I'd learned that financial exploitation of the elderly was one of the most underreported crimes in America, before I'd sat in Margaret Chen's office and heard the words, second-degree felony. I folded the letter, placed it in my evidence folder, and called Margaret. It's exactly what I expected, Margaret said after I'd read it to her. The repayment offer is interesting, though. It's essentially an admission of guilt. They're hoping you'll take the money and drop the investigation, but legally, this letter helps our case. Don't respond, Helen. Not yet. I didn't respond. But that afternoon, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Jennifer standing on my porch, alone, holding a small gift bag. She looked tired, I noticed, with shadows under her eyes. I didn't open the door. Mom, Jennifer called out, her voice carrying through the wood. I know you're home. Your car is in the driveway. Please, can we just talk? 5 minutes? I remained silent, motionless. I brought you some of that tea you like, she continued. The one from the specialty shop, and I wanted to explain. Mom, please. I'm alone. Michael doesn't even know I'm here. I just want to help you understand. The tea was a nice touch. Jennifer had always been good at these small gestures, these tokens of false intimacy. But I remembered what Margaret had said about documentation, about not engaging. After 5 minutes, Jennifer left the gift bag on my porch and walked back to her car. I watched through the window as she sat there for a long moment, probably waiting to see if I'd come out to retrieve it. I didn't. When her car finally pulled away, I took a photo of the gift bag through the window, then left it where it was. By evening, it was gone. Jennifer must have come back for it, or maybe Michael had. Saturday morning, Patricia called. Book club emergency meeting at my house, 1 p.m. Be there. When I arrived, I found not just Patricia, but also Diane, Martha, and Susan. All the women from our book club, all women I'd known for years. Patricia's dining room table was covered with food: sandwiches, salads, cookies, a pitcher of lemonade. "We heard what happened," Diane said as soon as I sat down. "Not the details, but enough. Patricia said you might need support." "We've all been talking," Martha added, her voice gentle. "And we want you to know you're not alone in this. Susan's daughter stole from her 5 years ago. Diane's nephew tried something similar with her father. This happens more than anyone wants to admit." Susan nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "It's the worst betrayal, isn't it? When it's your own child. Everyone thinks you should forgive, should keep the family together at any cost. But sometimes the cost is too high. For the first time since the soup incident, I felt the tight band around my chest loosen slightly. These women understood. They weren't judging me for taking action against my son. They were supporting me." "Thank you," I whispered. I was starting to think I was being too harsh, that maybe I should. "No," Patricia said firmly. "Don't you dare second-guess yourself, Helen. What Michael did was criminal. The soup incident was assault. You are not overreacting." We spent 3 hours together that afternoon. They shared their stories. I shared mine. They offered advice, resources, even offered to testify as character witnesses if it came to that. When I left Patricia's house that evening, I felt less alone than I had in weeks. Sunday, the day that would have been family dinner, I spent at the library volunteering, my usual shift, my usual routine. The normalcy was grounding. Several regular patrons asked where I'd been the previous weeks, and I deflected with vague explanations about family obligations. Michael and Jennifer didn't try to contact me that day, but I could feel them out there, watching, waiting, planning their next move. Let them plan, I thought. I had my own plans now, and a support system they knew nothing about. They came on Tuesday evening, just as the sun was setting. I was in my kitchen preparing dinner when I saw Michael's car pull into my driveway. Both he and Jennifer got out, and to my surprise, Emma and Jake were with them. The children looked uncomfortable, Emma holding her father's hand tightly, Jake trailing behind with his head down. Using the grandchildren. Of course they were. I didn't go to the door when they knocked. Instead, I called Margaret Chen. "They're here with the kids," I said quietly, watching through my kitchen window as Michael knocked again, louder this time. "Don't open the door," Margaret instructed immediately. "This is a classic intimidation tactic. They're counting on you not wanting to cause a scene in front of your grandchildren. Record everything if you can. Voice memo on your phone, video if possible. Document this, Helen." I set my phone to record audio and placed it in my pocket, then moved to the front door. I didn't open it, but I spoke through it loudly enough to be heard. "Michael, I'm not going to let you in. If you want to communicate, you can do it through my attorney." "Mom, please." Michael's voice was carefully controlled, that fake, reasonable tone he used when he was trying to manipulate someone. "We just want to talk. The kids miss you. They wanted to see their grandmother. You won't even let me bring my children to see you?" Through the window beside the door, I could see Emma's face, confused and sad. My heart ached, but I held firm. "The children are always welcome," I called back. "But not as props in your manipulation, Michael. Not as shields against the consequences of your actions." "Manipulation?" His voice rose slightly. "Mom, I'm trying to make peace here. I'm trying to be the bigger person." Jennifer's voice joined in, smooth and practiced. "Mom, we understand you're upset. We understand we made mistakes. But can't we work this out as a family? Do we really need lawyers and investigations? Think about what this is doing to everyone. Think about Emma and Jake. I am thinking about them, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm thinking about what they're learning when they watch their father face no consequences for theft. I'm thinking about the example being set. The facade started to crack. Consequences. Michael's laugh was bitter. You want to talk about consequences? Do you have any idea what this investigation is doing to me? My boss knows. My colleagues know. People are looking at me like I'm some kind of criminal. You are a criminal, Michael. You stole $52,000 from your elderly mother. I didn't steal anything, he shouted. That money was as much mine as it was yours. I'm your son. I'm your only child. Who else were you going to leave it to? And there it was. The truth, finally said out loud. He'd viewed my savings not as my property, but as his future inheritance, something he had a right to access whenever he wanted. The money was mine, I said coldly. Mine to do with as I pleased. Mine to save, to spend, to give away, or to take to my grave. You had no right to it. Jennifer's voice changed then, losing its sugary coating. You're being incredibly selfish, Mom. After everything we've done for you, we've included you in our lives, let you be part of the children's upbringing. Do you know how many people your age are lonely, forgotten in nursing homes? We've been good to you. By stealing from me? By burning me with hot soup in front of my grandchildren? That's your definition of good? That was an accident, Michael said quickly, too quickly. I already apologized for that. I lost my temper for 1 second, and you're going to use it to destroy me? You didn't apologize, Michael. You never apologized. You watched me leave with soup in my hair, and you let me go. You didn't call, didn't check if I was hurt. The only reason you're here now is because I cut off your access to my money. Silence. Through the window, I saw Michael's hands clench into fists. Jennifer placed a warning hand on his arm. Mom? Emma's small voice cut through the tension. Why won't you let us in? Did we do something wrong? My resolve nearly broke hearing her. Nearly. But I thought of Margaret's words about teaching children the right lessons, about showing them that actions have consequences even when, especially when, those actions come from people you love. You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart, I called to Emma. I love you very much. But your father and I need to work some things out with grown-up help, with lawyers. It's complicated. This is your final answer? Michael's voice had gone cold, empty of the false warmth he'd been using. You're really going to go through with this? You're going to try to send your own son to prison? I'm going to let the justice system decide what consequences are appropriate for your actions, I said. That's not the same thing. Fine, Jennifer said sharply. Then you should know. We're prepared to fight this. We have lawyers too, good ones. They're going to prove you're mentally incompetent, that you don't understand your own finances, that you're a danger to yourself. We'll get guardianship. We'll get power of attorney. You'll be in a nursing home before this is over, and we'll make sure Emma and Jake never see you again. The threat hung in the air, ugly and naked. Get off my property, I said, my voice shaking now, not with fear, but with fury. Get off my property now, or I'm calling the police. Come on, Jennifer said, pulling Michael away. She's not worth it. Let the lawyers handle it. They walked back to the car, Emma looking back over her shoulder with tears in her eyes. I watched them drive away, then sank down with my back against the door, my whole body trembling. The recording on my phone was still running. I stopped it and immediately sent it to Margaret with a message. They just threatened to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized. Margaret's response came within minutes. This is gold. Legal threats like this backfire spectacularly in court. They just gave us ammunition. Are you okay? Was I okay? I looked around my small, quiet house, at the life I'd built, at my independence that Jennifer had just threatened to strip away. I was terrified, but I was also determined. "I'm okay," I texted back. "I'm not backing down." The hearing took place 3 weeks later in a stark courtroom that smelled of furniture polish and old documents. Adult Protective Services had moved quickly once Jennifer's threat about declaring me incompetent had been recorded and submitted as evidence. Margaret had explained that the threat itself, combined with the financial exploitation and the assault, had elevated the case to urgent status. I sat at a long table, Margaret on my left, Sandra Morrison from APS on my right. Across the aisle, Michael and Jennifer sat with their attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Richard Blackwell, who'd apparently cost them a significant retainer. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Carolyn Hughes, reviewed the documents before her with a neutral expression. When she finally looked up, her gaze was piercing. "This is a preliminary hearing to determine if there's sufficient evidence to proceed with charges of financial exploitation of an elderly person against Michael Patterson," Judge Hughes said. "Mr. Blackwell, your client has pleaded not guilty. Would you like to make an opening statement?" Blackwell stood, smoothing his tie. "Your Honor, this is a tragic misunderstanding between a mother and son. Michael Patterson had authorized access to his mother's bank account, given willingly by Mrs. Patterson herself. The withdrawals in question were for legitimate family expenses, all of which can be documented and explained. Mrs. Patterson's memory has been failing." "Objection," Margaret said sharply. "There's no medical evidence of cognitive impairment. In fact, we have a recent evaluation from Mrs. Patterson's physician stating she's of sound mind." "Sustained," Judge Hughes said. "Mr. Blackwell, stick to facts, not speculation." I watched Michael's face as his attorney stumbled slightly. He looked smaller somehow, less confident than he'd been at my door. Jennifer sat rigid beside him, her expression carefully controlled. "Your Honor," Margaret said when it was her turn, "the evidence will show a clear pattern of financial exploitation escalating over 6 months, culminating in an attempt to withdraw more funds even after Mrs. Patterson had removed the defendant's access. We also have evidence of assault. The defendant threw hot soup on Mrs. Patterson in front of witnesses, his own children, and subsequent threats to have her declared incompetent when she took legal action." Judge Hughes raised an eyebrow. "I have the recording of that threat in evidence. We'll get to that. Mrs. Patterson, please take the stand." My legs felt shaky as I walked to the witness stand, but I kept my head high. I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks, rehearsing with Margaret, steeling myself for what I'd have to say. "Mrs. Patterson," Judge Hughes said, her voice gentler now, "please tell the court in your own words what happened." I did. I started with the day Michael had asked to be added to my account, his concerned face, his reasonable explanation. I described the withdrawals, his excuses, my growing suspicion. I described the dinner party, the soup, the burns on my scalp and face. "I didn't report it immediately," I said, my voice steady. "Because he was my son. Because I kept thinking there must be an explanation, that surely my own child wouldn't steal from me. But when I finally looked at my bank statements, when I saw $52,000 gone, I couldn't ignore it anymore." "Mrs. Patterson," Blackwell said when it was his turn to question me, "isn't it true that you frequently forgot to pay your bills? That you asked your son to help manage your finances?" "No," I said firmly. "I've managed my own finances for 47 years since I first started working. I've never missed a bill payment, never bounced a check. You can verify that with my bank." "But you're 68 years old." "Age doesn't equal incompetence, Mr. Blackwell," I interrupted. "I volunteer at the library, I drive, I manage my home. I'm not impaired. I was trusting. There's a difference." Judge Hughes nodded slightly, making a note. "Let's talk about the incident with the soup," Margaret said during redirect. "Mrs. Patterson, can you describe your son's demeanor that evening?" "He was cold," I said, remembering. Angry in a way I'd never seen before. When I asked for more soup, he exploded. It wasn't an accident. He stood up, grabbed the tureen, and deliberately poured it over my head. Then he said, "That's what you get for always asking for more." And what did his wife do? Nothing. She sat there and watched. Margaret pulled out a photo then, one I'd taken the next morning, of the burns on my scalp and forehead. The court went silent as it was displayed. "Your Honor," Margaret said, "these burns required medical attention. We have the ER records. This wasn't a momentary loss of temper. This was assault." Blackwell tried to argue that it was a family matter, not a criminal one, but Judge Hughes cut him off. "Mr. Patterson," the judge said, looking directly at Michael, "stand up." Michael stood, his face pale. "Did you or did you not withdraw $52,000 from your mother's account over a 6-month period?" A pause. Then quietly, "Yes." "Did you have her explicit permission for each withdrawal?" Another pause. "No, but..." "Yes or no, Mr. Patterson?" "No." "Did you throw hot soup on your mother?" Michael's jaw clenched. Jennifer reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Yes, but I..." "Yes or no?" "Yes." Judge Hughes leaned back, her expression hardening. "Mr. Blackwell, your client has just admitted to both the financial exploitation and the assault. I'm finding sufficient evidence to proceed to trial on all charges." Jennifer made a sound, half gasp, half sob. Michael's face crumbled. "Your Honor, please," Blackwell said desperately. "Can we discuss a plea arrangement?" "That's up to the prosecutor and Mrs. Patterson," Judge Hughes said. "But I will say this. Threats to have the victim declared incompetent to avoid prosecution don't help your client's case. This hearing is adjourned. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Patterson. He's being remanded pending trial." "What?" Michael's voice cracked. "You're arresting me?" "You're a flight risk with demonstrated contempt for your victim's well-being," Judge Hughes said. "Bail hearing tomorrow morning." I watched as a bailiff approached Michael, watched as Jennifer stood helplessly, watched as my son was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. He looked back at me once, and in his eyes, I saw not remorse, but rage. Margaret put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Helen. You did it." I nodded, unable to speak. I'd won. But God, it didn't feel like winning. The trial lasted 3 days. 3 days of testimony, evidence presentation, character witnesses. Patricia testified about my mental acuity. Frank Collins from the bank testified about the withdrawals. The emergency room doctor testified about my burns. Jennifer tried to testify that I'd been confused, that I'd encouraged Michael to use the money, but Margaret tore her testimony apart on cross-examination, pointing out the inconsistencies, the way her story changed to match whatever would help Michael most. Emma and Jake were not called to testify. The judge had ruled their testimony would be too traumatic. But their existence hung over the proceedings like a ghost. Every time Michael's attorney tried to invoke them, to talk about the children who would grow up without a father, Margaret countered with the grandmother who'd been betrayed by the son she'd raised. On the 3rd day, the jury deliberated for just over 2 hours, guilty on all counts. Financial exploitation of an elderly person, 2nd-degree felony. Assault, 1st-degree misdemeanor. Attempted theft after his access was revoked. Michael's face went white when the verdict was read. Jennifer openly wept. And I sat there, stone-faced, feeling nothing but a cold, hollow satisfaction. Sentencing came a week later. Judge Hughes looked tired as she reviewed the pre-sentencing report, as she listened to Blackwell's plea for leniency, for the sake of the children, for the sake of Michael's previously clean record. Then she looked at me. "Mrs. Patterson, would you like to make a statement before I pronounce sentence?" I stood, my prepared statement in hand, but when I opened my mouth, different words came out. "Your Honor, I raised that man," I said, looking directly at Michael, I gave him everything. I worked 2 jobs to send him to college. I loved him unconditionally, and he repaid me by stealing my life savings and burning me with hot soup when I asked for a second helping. My voice didn't shake. I felt nothing but ice. He's not sorry. He's sorry he got caught. He's sorry there are consequences. But he's not sorry for what he did to me. And I want the court to know. I don't forgive him. I won't forgive him. He can serve every day of whatever sentence you give him, and when he gets out, I still won't forgive him. Some betrayals are unforgivable. The courtroom was silent when I sat down. Judge Hughes nodded slowly. Mr. Patterson, please stand. Michael stood, his legs visibly shaking. You violated the most basic trust between parent and child, Judge Hughes said. You exploited your mother's love and trust for financial gain. You assaulted her when she dared to ask for more food at a family dinner. And when she took action to protect herself, you threatened to have her institutionalized. She paused, looking down at her notes. I'm sentencing you to 6 years in state prison on the exploitation charge, 1 year on the assault charge, to be served consecutively. 7 years total. I'm also ordering full restitution of the $52,000, plus interest and court costs. You'll pay $500 per month once you're released until the debt is satisfied. And I'm issuing a permanent restraining order. You are not to contact Mrs. Patterson in any way, directly or indirectly, for the rest of her life. Jennifer's cry echoed through the courtroom. 7 years. Michael would be almost 50 when he got out. Emma would be in college. Jake would be in high school. Your Honor, Blackwell tried one last time. The children, Judge Hughes interrupted, would be better served by a father who took responsibility for his actions rather than one who expected his mother to sweep them under the rug. This court is adjourned. The bailiffs approached Michael. He looked at me one final time, and I saw in his face the boy he'd once been, the child I'd rocked to sleep, the teenager I'd comforted through heartbreak. Then I saw him as he was now, a man who'd chosen greed over love, who'd valued money over family. I looked away first. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. The case had made local news. Elder abuse by adult children was a hot topic, apparently. Margaret had prepared me for this, had helped me write a brief statement. I'm speaking out because this happens to too many elderly parents, I said into the microphones. We're taught to protect our children, to forgive them anything. But there comes a point where protection becomes enabling, where forgiveness becomes permission to continue the abuse. I hope my case encourages other victims to come forward, to know that they deserve justice even when, especially when, the abuser is their own child. Do you regret turning in your son? One reporter called out. I met the camera's eye directly. I regret that I had to. But no, I don't regret doing it. Patricia drove me home afterwards. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. When we pulled into my driveway, I saw someone had left flowers on my porch. The card read, "From the library volunteers. We're proud of you." That night, alone in my quiet house, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not for Michael, he'd made his choices, but for the family I'd lost, for the Sunday dinners that would never happen again, for the grandchildren I might never see as they grew up. But when morning came, I dried my tears. I'd survived. I'd fought back. I'd won. And I would build a new life from the ashes of the old one. 6 months after the trial, my life looked completely different. I'd used part of the restitution money to take a trip to Italy with Patricia. 2 weeks of freedom in ancient cities. I'd started therapy and joined a support group for financial elder abuse victims. I'd begun volunteering as a peer counselor. My book club expanded to twice monthly. Diane introduced me to her brother Tom, a widower with a warm laugh. We'd been on several hopeful dates. The library asked me to give talks about elder abuse awareness at senior centers and community colleges. I'd found my voice in the ruins of my old life. And Emma had contacted me. At 16, newly licensed, she'd driven to my house alone. "Grandma, I'm so sorry," she'd said through tears. She'd questioned Jennifer's narrative, remembered that night with the soup, seen the truth. We started meeting for coffee weekly. She told me about school, friends, college plans. Jake was younger, still under Jennifer's influence. Maybe someday. Meanwhile, Jennifer and Michael's life had collapsed. They'd sold their house. Legal fees and restitution destroyed them financially. They moved into a small apartment. Jennifer struggled to find work. The trial's publicity followed her. Emma said her mother was constantly angry, blamed me for everything. Michael wasn't doing well in prison. He'd been assaulted once and moved to protective custody. The children stopped visiting. Jennifer tried reaching out with another manipulative letter. I filed it and got another restraining order. Her own parents cut her off, horrified. My house was truly mine. My savings were rebuilding. On Sunday mornings, instead of family dinners with Michael, I had brunch with Patricia, Diane, and sometimes Tom. Chosen family based on respect. I'd survived. More than survived. I'd thrived. And I had no intention of ever being anyone's victim again. So that's my story. The story of how I went from victim to survivor, from doormat to defender of my own dignity. What did I learn? I learned that love without boundaries is permission for abuse. I learned that family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who you choose. I learned that forgiveness isn't always the answer, that sometimes justice matters more than peace. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. If you're facing something similar, financial abuse, emotional manipulation, exploitation by someone you love, please know this. You deserve better. You deserve justice. You deserve to live your final years in peace and security, not in fear and poverty. Don't let anyone tell you that family should forgive anything. Some actions are unforgivable. And that's okay. What would you have done in my position? Would you have pressed charges against your own child? Would you have chosen justice over family harmony? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more real stories about real people facing real challenges. Thank you for listening. Thank you for not judging. Thank you for understanding that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the right thing to do. Stay strong. Protect yourself. And remember, you're worth fighting for.